we have an all-time high in national debt. At the same time, the government is voting on handing out a third stimulus check. And you factor in that over 0.25% of the income of American households come from the government. This is not going to end well. Let's talk about this. So today I wanted to take a quick minute and share my 2 cents on what's going on with the current status of this country having gone full-blown welfare nation. At the same time, all central banks, and especially Uncle Sam, has decided to weaponize the Federal Reserve note in order to keep this economy afloat for as long as possible. And at the current rate we on, this thing cannot last for long. So I got a couple articles I want to share with you real quickly and share my thoughts as to why I believe that this current time frame is probably one of the most important times in history for people to really take an interest in monetary literacy, as I call it. Because with all this debt, all this stimulus, factored into other things I'm going to talk about today, the average investor has no clue of the historical aspects that the financial wealth preservation role that gold and silver holds in this current moment. So make sure you guys stick around to the end because I'm curious to get your thoughts on today's subject. But before I dive into the articles, if you enjoy these short, quick takes, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button down below. That definitely helps more people come across this information. And then if you want to be notified, I would encourage you to click the notification bell. But sometimes, majority of the times, YouTube doesn't want to notify anybody. So I'd encourage you to scroll below this video and sign up to the email list. And whenever we go live, I'll send you an email directly to your email address. And then also make sure you guys connect with the community on social media, and particularly Discord, because we have conversations on there throughout the day. So as I mentioned, right now at this exact moment in time, Congress or the House is voting on $1,400 checks. And so the whole idea of a welfare nation is based upon the fact that now it has become a mainstream subject heading where all news sources and even politicians are basing this next stimulus package, the American Rescue Plan, upon giving more checks to the American populace, disguised as an aid to help struggling American families. But in my personal opinion, this is all a setup to further create a dependency upon Uncle Sam when it comes to providing for ourselves financially, as politicians continue to want to help the middle class, while these policies that they're throwing out there completely disincentivize the idea of working, nevertheless trying to work towards maintaining that middle class lifestyle that's associated with the American dream. And so what I would say is the most alarming is that 27% of all household income in the U.S. now comes from the government. And so within this article here from Zero Hedge, there's a lot of interesting graphs that I want to touch on and basically show you how this is all a great setup for the destruction of the Federal Reserve note, aka the dollar, because there's a lot of things that we can learn based upon the actions now in comparison to other countries. And I'm going to touch on that shortly. But just to give you an idea what's going on here, it says, following today's release of the latest personal income and spending data, Wall Street was predictably focused on the changes in 2 key areas, which were the surge in personal income, which is this first graph here, as well as coupled with a far more modest increase in personal spending, as well as savings. So from the graph right here, you can see that you have these 2 green bars, which represents the spike, as it says here, in personal income. And of course, the first was the first stimulus that came out April of last year. And then this one here was at the end of 2020, which was labeled the COVID relief bill. And then how it correlates to the expenditures. And so here it shows here that when people got those checks, they tend to do a little bit of spending, but more importantly, more was saved than spent. And then here we have this past January, where once again, you got those $600 checks. People seem to be starting to spend again. And then as you scroll down here, it gives another graph here, personal current transfer receipts. Basically, as it says here, the personal current transfer payments, which are essentially government sourced income, such as unemployment benefits, welfare checks, and so on. In January, this number was 5.78 trillion annualized, which was not only up by nearly 2 trillion from 3.8 trillion in December, it was also 2 trillion above the pre-COVID trend. And so once again, Uncle Sam borrowing and spending directly into the populace led to these sudden spikes of what they call is income. And then here's another article here that gives a good indication as to what I'm referring to, a welfare nation. America's income tumbled in January, excluding government handouts. So ultimately, actual earned income from time, skills, and labor spent into the economy was a lot less than what Uncle Sam gave out. And as I mentioned earlier on, when you have the mainstream media and politicians using the stimulus check narrative of creating a false hope of a recovery through handing out stimulus checks, and this is going to be the 3rd round, possibly, there's no way that they can withdraw this stuff back. So that only furthers creates a dependency upon Uncle Sam as this ultimate welfare nation experiment comes to a halt as they get ready to transition us into that digital economy. So one thing I wanted to bring to your attention was the fact that here we have the personal savings rate historical graph from the Federal Reserve. And as you guys can see over my shoulders here, since this data was first collected in the late 50s, you can see that overall the savings rate averaged approximately 10% or so until we got into the 90s and the 2000s to where it began to trend downward. And of course, we had the great financial crisis into what's considered the new greatest depression. And as you guys can see to the far right of this screen here, it wasn't until those first stimulus checks came out that the information here decided to spike. And as I zoom in here, I can give you a better idea as to what that looks like. And so this yellow section here represents the new Great Depression. And so as you guys can see here, as of April last year, when our first round of stimulus came out and those checks were given out, 33% of all the income that was given from the government went into the savings accounts. And throughout the year, it started to dwindle down as people were spending it. But here we are at the end of 2020 with that second stimulus check, heading back up towards a second all-time high. And right now, with them voting on our third round, it's good to say that this thing will probably continue to go back up, or more than likely, the spending might go up. And what does all that equate to? The Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, or what we're being told is the CPI, which is basically the cost of the goods we consume on a daily basis minus a couple of things. But as you guys can see here, once again, from the late 50s all the way up until this current time frame, the overall cost of living has been going up as the overall money supply has been going up. And ultimately, what does that lead to? The diminishing of purchasing power. So amongst all this stimulus, what I find to be the most interesting is the fact that since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, all the way up into this time frame here, when we get into the 2020 area, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see a little bit better. So here we are in the 2020 time frame. It's a continual downward trend of the actual purchasing power, or how much spending power you have amongst all of this quantitative easing and this newly found stimulus or welfare subsidies for the public. But what I find to be the most interesting out of all this is the fact that it's heading down in an even amount. And then as we get closer towards the 2020 time frame and into 2020, we are witnessing the same trajectory despite the fact that multiple trillions of units of currency in the form of Federal Reserve notes were brought into creation. And this thing continues to go down gradually in the same capacity. And supposedly it's around 38.2%, or approximately 3 cents of the original purchasing power of a single dollar. Something is extremely fishy here, because there's no way you can create 5 trillion plus and this thing still remains at an even killed 38 or 3 cents of the original purchasing power out of a single dollar. But this is how they can pull it off. Here we have the M1 money stock, which as of this past week will be discontinued along with the M2. And what made it even more interesting was that in 2006, the M3, which was a combination of all the total currency as well as the financial products that we've been given as investment tools, have been completely removed. And now they're changing the rules of the game on the fly. As opposed to reporting weekly, they're going to do it monthly. And mark my words, it's a matter of time before they stop reporting on how much currency is in existence altogether. But based upon all these welfare checks, all this debt, look over my shoulder right here and you'll see that the M1 money stock, or the actual currency in circulation or in checking accounts, has gone parabolic. And as I zoom in here, you're going to see how serious this thing is. Starting in 2007, we had the great financial crises. And from that point on, QE came into existence, and the monetary base has been continuing to expand over time. And then when you get to 2020, when everything hit the fan, when the new Great Depression began, we went from 4.5 trillion up to 16 trillion. And then, of course, throughout the rest of 2020, it got all the way up to, as it says here, 18.1 trillion. This is just what we've been told. This is just what they're revealing to us. Those that are in the alternative media realm, you know that these numbers are nowhere near true, because there's a lot of other missing trillions out there that we have no idea as to where they went. But what I found to be the most interesting out of this graph here is that it resembles another nation's graph, and when it comes to their M1, which a lot of people, unfortunately, are not even aware of outside of those that are a part of the RTD community, because you guys have been informed, because I've been talking about it forever. But here's a graph that I want to show you that really summarizes how an indebted government that creates a welfare nation based upon checks and subsidies directly to the populace at an infinite supply without the necessary demand, which ultimately weaponizes the currency, how it can destroy a nation. And so as you guys can see over my shoulder right here, we have the Venezuela money supply M1. So this is Venezuela's M1, according to an external site called tradingeconomics.com. And as you can see here, you see the similarities in the M1 supply based upon the graph I have over my head here. You have a hockey stick where over the last decade plus in Venezuela, the currency supply has increased so much And we know how bad and how devastating things are in the country of Venezuela with hyperinflation. And the only reason they have hyperinflation there is because it's a small, isolated event with the Venezuelan bolivar, which is a currency that only the Venezuelans actually use or used to use. But currently here in the United States, having the world reserve currency, it's been able to buy us time, because as of now, the Federal Reserve note is still the reserve currency, but those days are dwindling very fast when you see graphs that resemble this. To just show you the similarities, I'll go back here to the M1 money supply for the US so you can get a chance to see that. You might be wondering, what exactly are you talking about, Mike? Okay, Uncle Sam is creating a welfare nation. They're sending out stimulus checks, destroying the currency, basically robbing the current generation and future generations of purchasing power. So what does that mean? What it means is simply that more people need to come to the realization of what true money is in regards to sound money, not just fiat currency. Because as these checks continue to be rolled out here, more people are taking those checks, they're putting them in their saving accounts, increasing the percentage rate of savings within the banks themselves. And the banks are the primary reason that the economy is the way that it is, because everything is based upon the banking sector or the too big to fail banks. And so that's why I believe it's important for you guys to share videos like this, as well as videos from your other favorite content creators, because the whole goal here is to educate people so that people can understand the importance of gold and silver. And my biggest mantra on this channel here is the importance of getting your weight up, physical gold in your hands while you still can. Because as of right now, as I'm speaking to you, I'm looking above my head here, and you can see the price of actual gold and silver in this current environment, given the fact that trillions of fiat currency units have been created. And these monetary tools here have not even really reflected the true nominal value in regards to the amount of paper in circulation. And so right now is probably one of the greatest and probably the last buying opportunity you have outside of all the manipulation in the markets with the future contracts and stuff like that. But you get my drift. But unfortunately, a lot of people are still not awake and aware, and the responsibility falls upon you and I to continue to get information out there. And that's why I think it's important for you to take this video and share it with family and friends so other people can get a chance to question the mainstream lie and realize that we're being dumbed down to depend upon Uncle Sam. So I want to wrap this up by sharing with you a video I put together a couple years ago, and it has to do with the idea of basic monetary literacy and understanding the importance of gold in particular, and how from 1933 up until 1974, it was illegal to own physical gold. And so I put together a little quick video here. And if you guys are interested, you can click the link above my head and watch it. And then ultimately what it does, it points back to the actual article I wrote. And I think it's one of the last articles I actually wrote for the blog until I got into doing videos every day. But basically here it summarizes, it gives you an idea as to what's going on in the monetary system from a historical aspect and why it's important to get physical now like never before, given the fact that this economy is sinking faster and faster with each stimulus check they give us. And so that's all I have. I just wanted to connect with you guys and share with you my thoughts as to why this welfare nation, through all these stimulus checks, using a weaponized dollar can only end in disaster. And right now is a short window of time to get your weight up at these current prices while you still can. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And feel free to share it with family and friends so more people can find out what's going on outside of the mainstream narrative, which of course at this current moment, we can't trust the graphs or the stats that's being given to us. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you guys later.